So I've got another drum mixing trick for you, and this is basically what I've done here already. It's about using sends and returns to isolate the transients of sounds and then layer them in with the original sound. So let me demonstrate. I've got the snare here, and I'm gonna create a send. Let me just add FX track, and because Bitwig lets you put sends into groups like your drum group or something, this really helps sort of keep track of what you're doing and where you're doing it. So what I'm gonna do is, let me just hit play here. Maybe I think the transient of the snare could be stronger. So what I will do is I'm going to send the snare to the send here. And then I'm gonna get a transient shaper. I like the kilohertz one, but you can use whatever you want. You can use transient control or something, or even actually, why not? Let's use transient split here, because this is linear phase, because it's spectral. So let's set it to percussive and just isolate the transients here. Now you can hear some pre-ringing from the linear phase. So that might not be ideal, but what we can do is we can then get like a kilohertz transient shaper. Then we can kind of turn this down, turn the speed up, and just get the transient. And now we've got this mix fader here, so we can listen to the snare and then we can kind of blend this in. And you can hear how it makes our transient much stronger. I'm gonna remove this transient split for now. Just use, kind of turn the speed down a bit. Because this is the kind of bit I want to reinforce. You can hear how the transient becomes much stronger. You can also see this here. How it really layers in that transient. And doing this with sends has a couple of advantages. For example, if you clip the drums here, so I can turn this thing off, I can get this send track, and I can just put it to the global send, so outside of this group. And then I can take these drums here, for example, limit these drums or clip these drums with like a limiter. And of course, we're gonna lose a lot of transient to this. So after this limiting stage, I can then kind of reintroduce a bit of the transient here. So if we look at this, just like bring it in a bit again. So you can kind of combine hard clipping this or really hard limiting this, and then reintroducing the transient. Now another thing you can do with this is that you can use it to kind of shape the drum transient a bit more by using bandpass filters on this track. Now to kind of demonstrate this, because I'm sure you'll be worried about phase stuff, I'm going to show you something that Dan Borrell shows in his video on phase, on parallel bandpass filters. So essentially what I'm going to do here is I'm gonna get my favorite EQ, which is this one, because it's nice, and then I'm going to put this in parallel with just a dry chain, and then kind of use a low pass and a high pass filter here, and look at the total EQ curve. So you can kind of see how this gets added back together and then forms this kind of filter curve, because we've got the phase shift here of the filter, and you can see some phase cancellation on either side of the filters when the dry signal and the filtered signal is mixed. However, if we set this to a one-pole filter, so at 6 dB per octave slope, you see this curve kind of gets steeper, but we don't really get any phase cancellation. And so if we keep these slopes not that high, we don't get these weird artifacts here. where you can kind of get like a notch here. So you will want to keep the slope quite high when you do this on the transient chain and intend to mix it with a standard snare. Or you can also set the phase to linear phase, of course. Of course, linear phase with pre-ringing, I wouldn't recommend it on transient. It can kind of soften your transient, or something like mix phase maybe. You can see how it kind of gets a little less sensitive to these phase changes. But because this is a drum, I really don't want to play with a linear phase. I want to keep this natural phase, and I'm just going to use this kind of band pass with a narrow slope by just using a high pass and a low pass. And then I can kind of listen to this transient here. And I'm just gonna remove my test setup. Just like listen to the transient. And kind of filter it to the parts of, because I want to focus it mostly. I don't really need the high stuff here. It's more for me about the knock in this mixing situation. Of course, this will always differ. And then you can also do stuff like kind of similarly to what something like Spectre would do, is you can saturate this. So you can get like a saturator and turn the loud all the way up. Not really drive this, but you can use the quiet bit to introduce some type B saturation. You can hear how it's kind of getting gated. I've got a full video on saturator if you want to really understand how this works, but basically it kind of gates the transient. You can get a really nice tight transient sound this way, and kind of saturating it will make it sound a bit more natural after the filtering. So then we can listen to our snare here. And kind of look at this oscilloscope and just take this out. And then blend in this transient we created. And get like a really nice hard-hitting transient this way. And yeah, again, if you want to bus limit these drums, you can then use this to reintroduce this transient. You can of course automate these filters here if you want like different emphasis. So maybe sometimes you want a brighter transient, sometimes not, according to some rhythmic pattern. You can also send like other tracks to this. So for example, I've got a ghost snare here. Maybe I want the ghost snare's transient to be reinforced a bit too. So I can look on these sends here, go to perk, and I know the audio one is my ghost snare, I think. But it's not playing in this section. Now that's of course unfortunate. No, it is playing. Audio 2 is my ghost snare. So I can then take this, go to my transient shaper, also introduce my ghost snare to this. So also my ghost snare gets kind of reinforced. And then we can listen to this. And then you can listen to it without the transient edition. So I'm gonna turn this on and off. And you can also use this to like drive it into a clipper. Once again with. And without. So yeah, this is a really nice trick for kind of tighter, snappier transients that you can then akin to an analog transient designer sort of saturate, and you can filter this. You can use things like type B saturation, where you kind of gate out the quieter parts of this, which is something I'm gonna be doing more. I actually just thought of that while doing this tutorial. But yeah, I think this is a really neat trick for getting more control of your transient and kind of making it all a bit easier to manage and just something that you can make conscious decisions about, which I find is always very valuable in transient shaping, because otherwise it's always this balancing game, and this kind of helps you just isolate the transient, shape it exactly how you want, and then mix it in. And once again, be careful to not make these filter slopes too tight, because otherwise you're gonna get phase cancellation. But if you use a one pole filter, so 6 dB per octave, this is not gonna cause any problems. So yeah, that's this technique of kind of using sense for transient shaping, which is maybe a bit counterintuitive. Inside groups, outside groups, this can be a really neat trick. Once again, I really like how Bitwig does sense, that it lets you have sense inside the groups. And yeah, hope you found that helpful. See you in the next one.